Today we are going to be looking at a piece of functionality I've been building for some time to add the ability inside the GitLab Triage Ops project to do GraphQL queries. For a bit of background, the Triage Ops project is used with a lot of the automations behind GitLab bot. So often if you see GitLab bot commenting on a particular merge request or something, it's often driven by an automation inside TriageBot itself, which is nice. Driven by an automation inside TriageOps. Sorry, not inside TriageBot. TriageBot isn't a thing. So yeah, we're just going to be sort of drilling down into one of the test suites that we've built around this client. And based on a couple of review comments we've had around this, we want to make sure that we're testing the interface that this client is offering to the rest of TriageOps without actually going and testing the GraphQL client itself, because the GraphQL client is being provided by a Ruby gem, and testing standards dictate that we assume that the gem or the dependency we're using has its own level of testing and works by itself. So we just need to test our implementation and our interface. So yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and share my IDE, and then we can sort of take a look at what we've currently got and how we can make that better. Now, give me a moment. It takes me a while always to find this. So I don't want to share entire screen because that will make things very small. There we go. Let's share that. So I'm just going to share my IDE, I think.
Yeah, it's catching up.
Yeah, Restream always has a bit of a moment when I share from my machine, so it'll get there now.
Sometimes
I get the audio and for a moment. There we go. Yeah. Okay. So I get the audio for a moment, and then suddenly things sort of catch up. But yeah, okay. So great, we've got access to my window there and everything. So just to sort of see what we've got running so far, if I just do a run of the tests that we have to date, they run through and we get sort of eight checks, and then now we can sort of dig through what this actually looks like currently. So we check to see whether we have a query, and that returns a query result. If we've got a query with a specific resource path, so a lot of the client code here I lifted from the GitLab Triage gem, which is actually used a lot by the Triage Ops project, as Marco, I think, as you know. So I just kind of kept a lot of the implementation very similar. But yeah, so this we can filter down some of the query if we want to. So a typical response from a query would actually look like sort of that. But if you wanted to, you can actually go and reduce that query down by sort of specifying a set of additional things. And you could make that that would work too, which would then go and reduce the query down even further, and you just get that out of the query engine.
Also, basically, you can specify the name of the attribute to get out of the query.
Yes, exactly. So you could actually just instead of having to then go and parse the query results yourself, you could almost tell the query engine to just give me something quite specific back.
Okay.
And then we have a test for a paginated query and a so that just handles pagination so that we know that we can get pagination details back. But again, some of these things may be less necessary if we're going to go and just make sure we're testing the interface rather than testing the client itself. So one of the big things with a GraphQL client, or at least the Ruby GraphQL client, is the first time you invoke it against an API point, it pulls a copy of the schema.
Okay.
Now that schema operation is a big operation because it actually pulls something that looks a little like so it executes a schema query that is a pretty big introspection query. So I captured one of the schema query requests, and that's what it looks like. And then that gives back this very chunky document, which when you're querying the current sort of GitLab GraphQL for a schema, you're getting back 172,000 lines worth of schema, which is chunky.
Yeah.
So save that sort of as a fixture. But again, do we need to be querying that? And that's so a lot of the debate at the moment is, do we need to have this big schema as a fixture in the thing and pretend that we're passing it back and forth, or do we just can we just
cache it?
Well, so the client is definitely planning to cache it. So the client is planning to cache it, and so that's what it does. And the tests as it stands right now make sure that actually works. So what happens is, if when we make our first call, it gets it. So it's actually inside triage ops, we have the ability to cache certain objects.
Yep.
So we're creating that cache, and when we call once we call the schema the first time, it actually goes and calls the schema, and then if we go and call the schema a second time, it's not. We know that. So we know that sort of schema caching is working, and if we expire the cache, we test, and it actually goes and gets a new one. So that's great. But again, do we need to have the whole fixture in there? So could we kind of just say, what I'd love to say here is, can we mock the schema call? So currently I've mocked the schema call by actually making a full call and sort of a full mock. So there is a so we've got a copy of the schema itself, and we're effectively returning that. Let me just find the actual mocks. I can't remember where I popped them.
Oh, the issue is that if we write the mock inside of the repository, then when the schema changes and we make a change to a query, the schema wouldn't be the same. So maybe the query would fail on the specs, but it would actually work on production.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah. like I say, we don't want the additional maintenance of keeping the fixture up to date with the full schema, and making sure that the schema is always up to date in the test pack, because as we well know, the production GraphQL API is changing all the time as we're making changes.
Yeah.
Where have I got it? Sorry.
And what if the response of that schema is not stored inside of the repository itself, but for example, like a preparation job before running the tests on CI, we run the query, get the schema, and use that in the later jobs to running the specs.
Yeah, possibly. But again, I think we don't need to test whether the client whether the gem is actually able to sort of pass the schema back and forth. If we can kind of just say,
Okay,
in
no.
our tests, we can expect that there's going to be a call out to the schema operation, and the schema operation is going to return back a pass, and we don't need to actually check that it's returning back a valid schema, because that's part of the gem's responsibility. We
Yeah,
just want to
because
make sure that when we call a query, we know that in the background a schema call will be made, and we kind of assume that schema call will be set will be
yeah, because when writing specs on 3A jobs, we wouldn't actually make a call to the GraphQL endpoint. We would mock the data returned by the GraphQL endpoint. So we
exactly.
don't
So
actually need the schema.
exactly. So I have some mocks here. Sorry, just trying to find them. So I already have a chunk of those mocked. Just can't find exactly where that is. So I have got in here, I've got some stubbed GraphQL queries.
Yeah, that's basically the same that we do when writing mocks for Apollo queries on the front end of GitLab.
Yeah, so here we go. So I've mocked these out, but now again, each one of these. So now I have to sort of say, okay, well, if we get a request out to that endpoint, with this particular body, then and these headers, then return this fixture back with these headers, etc. Which is a lot of maintenance to do, and a lot of potentially unnecessary maintenance. If we rather just say, okay, at this point we expect that object to receive this call and return another call, then that's fine. And we focus our spec on testing that interface between the triage ops concern and its caller,
Yeah,
rather than
we
what's
just
happening on the back of the triage ops concern.
yeah, we just have to make sure the 3A job shit's working, not the
Exactly.
GraphQL stuff is working.
Exactly.
Wouldn't it be enough to mock the code to the client and just return a JSON of what we expect the client to return?
I
By
think
passing all of the schema and the HTTP request and all of that stuff.
exactly. So I think, and I'm just going to link out to the specific MR that this has been working on now, and we can look at the last comment on there. The last comment on there from Remy was, why don't we stub the client? So instead of worrying about passing JSONs back and forth, we just stub the client sort of almost entirely, and we say, right, at some point when we make a call, here's the JSON that here's the actual query results that come back, but in the background we know that the client's kind of done this. And
Yeah.
I think that's where my personal sort of limitations have been in, because I've just been sort of battling and tripping over the stubbing at the right level and getting that stubbing done. And I've got the stubbing in, and I've got I've got a chunk of the stubbing in. As you can see, the test is passing with the stubs that I've got. But actually, how do we make these steps even sort of simpler without actually having the bits? So what I'm just gonna throw the throwing the MR into there. If I
Okay. Because I do have an idea on how we could do it.
so if I chop and change my sharing, it's going to it gets a little bit painful. So
I can share my screen with the MR if you want
yeah,
to.
yeah.
Okay. Do this. A little bit of inception, but now I've got the MR page open.
Great. Yeah, so if you go down to the sort of last query there, or the last sort of comment that's currently open.
Okay. I guess, yeah, this one.
Yeah. So this specific comment specifically talks about in the sort of stubbed queries where we're currently stub out the query, call, and then we return the sort of GraphQL schema JSON.
Yeah.
Remy kind of says, why don't we just say, oh well, let the client receive the load schema call and just return a schema.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is the one that I was kind of sort of battling with specifically. And then he links out to where we do that in where it's done inside the GitLab triage. And again, I was just really kind of battling to sort of get those links in and trying to stub it out completely.
Okay. This is
in the GitLab triage gem where I lifted some of the code from.
okay. Okay. Oh, because okay, the GraphQL adapter, basically a call to client, returns the actual GraphQL client, I guess.
Yeah, but it's just actually kind of returning a generic client thing there, and it's just
Yes.
saying, hey, cool, now I'm expecting to make a call here and receive this.
Okay.
Maybe I just need to kind of sit and hammer at this a little bit more. But yeah, I'm just kind of tripping up over getting this actually sort of running. How do I adjust the tests to be able to? So if we go down back into the tests of the where we do the sort of schema query response. So
Schema.
this particular sort of line, well, this particular line is looking at the sort of stub share content. If you go to the changes tab,
Yeah.
and you have a look in the query spec file, yeah, around line 109 or so.
Okay.
I think that's what we're currently sort of saying. So right now I'm saying, cool, expect it to receive the load schema and return back a schema, that's fine. But and then when we call it again, we're expecting it to sort of not receive a post. But can we make that? Can we make that even more
generic?
Well, lift that test up even higher, because what's happening in the background there is that load schema is still making a call. There's still a post call that's mocked in the background. Can we just mock the? Can we change the level of the mock? Is really the question there.
I think that has to do with the instance double stuff.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, so we've actually got to create an instance double of a schema there.
Now, in theory, you should be able to create an instance double of the GraphQL
client itself.
Yeah, like they do in here. And instead of query, receive client, GraphQL adapter, return client.
Okay, right. I think something has just flicked the switch. So okay, so we create that instance double of our client.
And we mount the return value of the query method.
Yes. Okay, so then we can say, so at that point when we say, right, allow it to receive query or whatever, and then we return a specific, and we just return that response, and then we look at that response, and that should then do the thing in the background without actually doing the mocked HTTP calls.
Yeah, that should work. Yes. So I'm going back to your screen then.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Nice.
Awesome.
Cool. Okay, so then let's just create a new. Just create a new client here. And that will look something like this instance double. So it's this instance double stuff that I haven't played with much before. Instance double.
Yeah, in theory, if you do that way, you don't even have to test for the schema and all of that stuff. You just check. I mean, you don't have to. Yeah, you bypass all that schema check.
Yeah. So I mean that schema check all comes in here. So effectively, we know this will be working well when I can kind of actually almost get rid of this, get rid of these stubbed queries.
Yes. I mean, you still have to stub something, but you have only no. You don't even have to stub something.
We shouldn't have to, and that's it. Because yeah, the idea there is that so we should be able to. Let's just say
that goes away, and
let's just comment one of these out.
Yes.
And save that. We haven't saved that. If I just run the tests again, the tests should blow up, which is fine. We're expecting them to blow up. The idea here is we want to fix the tests so that they're not blowing up. Okay, the test's blowing up because the query is failing. That's fine. All right, that's the one that we want to fail.
Okay.
Okay, so now, so if we create a client, with this instance double. Okay, and then that creates that. And then we should have a...
Well, you can basically copy and paste the first 5-6 lines of that query from the GitLab triage.
Okay, so let's just do that.
Because this way, when you have to make sure that the triage ops works for making a specific query, you just have to set the response data value.
Yeah. Okay, so then this was the paginated query. That was the one that's breaking.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's... So that's doing the query. So before that query happens, we should then be able to say, well, before is under the its, or no, put it in the context here.
Well, yeah, you should put it in the context, but you could even just try it out without the before.
Yeah, let's just do that.
No, that's the allow.
Yeah, gotcha.
Do you have the GraphQL adapter in here?
Concrete, it's concrete object in this case.
Okay.
Because yeah, so it's a concrete object because I've built this as a concern that we can use as a mix-in.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so allow concrete object to receive
Client.
and turn. We don't actually use client here, do we?
Or errors or response data. I hope not, because otherwise you would have to change the names.
Okay, yeah, no, that's right. Okay, so that's cool. So we've allowed it to receive client and return client. Okay, now what we can do is we can then say expect client to receive paginated query. Okay. No, to receive query. Paginated query.
Now that's doing the check. You should be good without that, because you are mocking the GraphQL adapter, so the concrete object, to receive the client, a call to client, and return the client that we have mocked up.
Okay, so, but actually here, but yeah, to return the client that we've mocked up, but that mock client.
That mock client has its query method.
Okay, yeah. So it returns response when it gets
Query.
that method of query. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so let's see. So that should be enough.
In theory. There's a failure.
Okay, it's a lot smaller failure than it was before.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's because, and here's one thing where we've deviated from the other thing. So we do this parse query. So it just needs to accept.
And what should be returned? I mean, what's parse query?
Parsed query is a GraphQL object. Sorry, I'm just looking for the Ruby doc now.
Because we are mocking the query.
So the query method here on the left does a parse. I don't define parse. Parse comes from
The library
the
itself.
yeah. So can I just say
the issue is what should we return? Because I guess it's not the same as response.
no, it isn't. It's a I'm just trying to find the Ruby doc here.
In the meantime, I'll be right back.
No problem. So just looking for so parse in the client.
And I'm back for now.
That was quick.
Yeah, because they didn't answer.
Okay, so parse in the client. So just let me just share the. That's the. I'll just pop it into Discord here. That's the underlying client.
Okay, and
that's the. So the underlying client says that when we define a query, and that query needs to be parsed, and that parsed query.
Oh, because that's a file.
Hey?
On parse.
Yeah.
Oh no, you provide a string and a file name.
We just pass. You pass it a string.
Yeah.
Which contains a query.
Oh, replace Ruby constant reference with GraphQL fragment names while populating the definition dependencies with GraphQL fragment AST, which is, oh boy. How can we?
This parse. So yeah. So it creates an operation definition fragment.
Well, actually, we don't need that because we are. If you go to the, oh, that it's there. So when we call query, we do a client parse, and then we call client query with the parsed query.
Yes.
But we don't need that parsed query anywhere else, right?
No.
So we could stop the parse method and return nil, because the client.query will return what we specify on the mock.
Yeah, so let's do that.
Oh, be right back.
No problem. Okay, so we're moving forward here. So now we're expecting our response to look like paginated queries results, which are here. Okay, and what we actually got back was nothing. That's fine. That's because we're returning that as a response. Okay, so actually we just tweak what we're returning in this thing. So we want to return paginated query result there rather than response data nil. Okay, so that's working.
And I'm back.
Great. So yeah, that's actually, so since you left, mocking out the pars or nullifying the pars, then came back, and then so now it's starting to actually look at the results that we're expecting versus the results that we're getting. And initially that's because we were using this nil as response data.
Yes.
So I've just changed that now to our paginated query result, which looks like that.
Yes.
Which is great, but actually I think the format of that is incorrect, because now I'm getting it doesn't know what group merge requests looks like. So what I think I need to do here is so that's the query. The actual results would look something like and then to a hash.
Oh yeah, because you have to create the full response.
Yeah. Because the thing is actually doing the reduction of the path for us. So that
shouldn't that be an arrow?
should be an arrow, indeed. Oops. Okay. Okay, it's still getting an undefined group coming back because it don't think it likes this reduction side of things.
Oh, because we are mocking query and we don't do the reduce, maybe. Reduce resource.
So now I think I've messed this query up quite a bit.
Undefined method.
Group. Yeah, so that's it's coming moaning from this resource path. So this resource path is doing a reduce on the response data. So actually, so data looks like that currently. Is that what we get back from a call
Query.
against the I can't remember exactly what.
I don't know.
So GraphQL, that's what the query looks like. So let's open up that fixture. So we have this much saved because we had this all stubbed.
Yes.
Okay, so that's actually what we want it to look like.
Oh, you're missing nodes as well.
Yes.
I think.
So let's just take this whole thing. Actually want to just step this back a bit because paginated query result is actually the thing that we want out of our client.
Okay.
We actually want that, but what we actually want here is response data should look like.
Yeah, more or less.
Okay, and then that should be
Response data. Is it going to complain about the column? I guess that has to be changed to an arrow.
Yeah, possibly. Doesn't seem to be complaining about that.
Yeah, that's surprising. Undefined method. Why is it calling?
So it's got to do with how this reduction happens here. So this parse response takes this resource path in which we supply.
Okay.
Okay, which looks like, where is it? There, that's the resource path we're supplying.
Yeah.
Okay, and then it uses it on the response data. So if we do try that. Wow. That broke a lot of things.
The other option is to just write there. Oh, that works.
Okay, so if I look at response, it is our double, okay, which, okay, so it's,
Oh, that's our instance double. Okay.
yeah, okay, so response data is
maybe data. Maybe data is. We don't need that.
I think we do because the actual JSON.
So we have data inside of data.
Ah, yes, okay, good call. So I think that's exactly what's happened here. So we need to just take one layer out here.
Oh yeah, because we are returning. Yeah, I think that's the problem. Pretty sure.
Let's just get rid of this pry. Let's let it run through the first time. Wait, come on. Okay, it's still moaning now about group. So I think let's just put the pry back. It's got to do with this side here, what's happening. The reduced method still kind of breaks my brain a little bit. Resource path looks like that.
Okay.
Response.data looks like that.
Okay. Group.
Happy with those. Ruby reduce. It's reduce combines all of the elements of the thing by applying a, so you specify, by the way, not specifying a block. So yeah, we are specifying a block. Okay.
Oh, the data and dot send reduce, that's calling the method group.
Yes. Because in a GraphQL client, an actual GraphQL client response, not a stubbed one, that's not just a dumb hash, that's actually a thing with methods.
Oh. Can't we just mock parse response?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because we don't have.
So that's not a client thing, is it? It's a.
No, that's concrete objects.
Yeah.
Huh. And the issue is that you wouldn't be able to extract the data.
Yeah. So let's try that. So now if we receive parse response, we'll return paginated query result, which we've got there. Oh, someone's been chatting on Slack, on Twitch. We'll have a look in a moment.
Oh. Oh.
Let's just try this one, and then we can have a look at that question, maybe.
Yeah, that's related to Visual Studio, though. If you're still watching, I did have some issues with my installation of Visual Studio to 2022 that the sidebars were missing because they were floating somewhere else on the screen. So I'm not sure that's the same issue you're having though.
Yeah, not sure if we've got anyone actually in. Oh, they're still here. So I think. Okay, so that call, it's now moaning about page info, but that's fine. I think we're on the right path there around what we are intercepting there. So
yeah, the thing is that if we mock parse response, we actually don't really need to mock the query. No, we still need to mock that. No, because we mocked parse because we don't need that. We mocked query, and the response of the query we pass it to parse response. But
yes,
we mocked parse responses, so we don't even need to mock um, to get a valid return value from query.
yeah, you're right. But now what's happening is it's dying here on line 34 in the query. So
Oh,
because now we're making more calls in, and there again, page info isn't working because page info expects a appropriate thing. So but I think I'm largely unblocked here. I think I can hack away at um, this, try to find a little more elegant solution. But I think yeah, we've definitely helped with getting the right levels of mocks in, um, and figuring out which things of
well, yeah, I'm still not too convinced because we are bypassing a lot of stuff. I mean, parse response is technically not the uh, gem implementation.
it's our implementation. Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, exactly. So the trick, I think the trick here is to actually make sure that the double we create behaves like the thing that we want it to behave like. And I think that's possibly where the query is here. So maybe what we do is in the double here, we actually just make sure that we're embedding the correct
yeah, but
embedding the correct pieces so that we're not we're not mocking the HTTP calls in the background because they're getting caught by the double, but we're returning the right things so that the actual client implementation can then continue the way it needs to continue.
yeah, the response now, the response double nodes, double. Oh, I'm looking at the GitLab triage file that you sent me, And when response matches the resource path. That's creating a double of nodes, page info, and the cursor itself. Query to response object. Oh, so there's another thing that's the response object. Okay, so response data is not a hash table like we created.
Okay. Yeah, it's a double itself of something with
Yes.
that will then respond appropriately. Okay.
Yes,
And
exactly.
that makes sense. Okay. So then if we then tweak the response data to be an appropriate double
Yeah.
of what the
Well,
underlying response class would be, then we don't need to then try to we don't need to
we don't need to mock the parse response.
yes, because we don't actually want to mock the parsed response because that's all part of our actual client implementation. So it's just a case of figuring out which pieces we need to mock and
Yeah.
which pieces we don't want to mock.
Yeah. And at this point, we just have to figure out how to actually create a good response data with how to match what the client would give us.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just the trick there, I think, is just getting the balance of where you mock and where you don't, so that you make sure that you're testing the right stuff.
Yeah.
You're not you don't want to mock out the stuff that you're testing, but at the same time you want to make sure that the test is actually testing the class that you implement. I think
Yeah.
this sort of level of mocking probably gets better the more you do it. I'm still pretty new at creating mocks and these sort of things, so I'm pretty chuffed that I managed to get as far as I did get before I ran into a cliff. But yeah, okay. I think just discussing this out a little bit more as has definitely helped me a little bit, and possibly just need to sort of see how we add more doubles to turn this response data into a thing with doubles rather than just a hash, because we can't uh, do actions on a hash. So we almost want
I think this is a pretty good example of what you need. I'm sending it on Discord because that's setting up a response object. Oh, yeah, and this one as well.
yeah, exactly.
Because the response object, that's basically, I think that would be nodes, basically a hash table with nodes and page
Yeah,
info. Yeah, you basically have to recreate that.
yeah. Okay, so they start up on line 13 there, um, with just setting response data to nil.
Yeah,
But actually, then later on in the actual context, they then fill out response data with what it actually should be. So nil is just a default for it, but they actually then go and fill it out.
oh yeah, because it's setting response data to be the equivalent of project, issues, nodes, and
Yes,
page info.
correct. Yeah, which is which is what the actual object looks like. So yeah, so it's not the hash that
Yeah,
we're creating, but it's actually a mocked object that will respond the way we're expecting it to respond.
yeah, that makes
Okay,
sense.
cool,
Awesome.
fantastic. Thank you. Hopefully, I can move forward on this sometime this week, and uh, we can get this client into triage ops, because I think there's a lot of things we can do with potentially that we don't have access to now.
Oh yeah,
If we get that into triage ops, then we can start making a lot more sort of we can start doing some really dynamic calls.
yep, definitely.
Yeah, nice. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to probably end on today.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you very much for your help and guidance. It's definitely just helped me break through the mental barrier of some of this mocking stuff and doubles and fake objects and baiting and switching and getting the right thing through the
Yeah,
through
I'm still not used to that as well, but I the hard part is getting the idea of how those doubles work.
yeah. I think you're spot on there, and the trick there is that, from at least the way I understand it now, is that the double kind of catches what you want to throw at it and returns the stuff that you expect back,
Yeah,
and without doing the actual things behind it.
yeah,
And that helps us, yeah. And again, it just helps us focus on making sure that we're testing our interface and not actually testing the client itself, because we know the client, well, we assume the client works because it's got its own tests.
yes,
And then as long as we're testing our own, we just need to be testing the class that we've written. And anything that happens behind that, we say, okay, well, if this was working the way it should be working and we made this call, then we would get that response back, and we can then continue. Nice.
yes.
Cool.
Perfect.
Great. Well, have a great day further, and
You as
thank you
well.
for joining us on the stream, for anyone who has.
Yes.
And yeah, have a great
Awesome.
Tuesday.
Yeah, let's end it now then. Bye, everyone.